Professor Nix 427 adjusted her sensory appendages as she studied the peculiar object on the examination table. The Galactic Institute of Advanced Sciences prided itself on understanding every technological advancement in the known universe, yet this simple mechanical device from Earth had stumped their finest minds for weeks. "Most perplexing," she murmured, her crystalline form shifting colors in confusion. "Administrator Vix, please note. Study iteration 2749 of the human time measurement device, designation mechanical watch, remains inconclusive." Her assistant, a younger being composed of shifting geometric patterns, pulsed in acknowledgement. The laboratory, usually a beacon of order and efficiency, had descended into what the humans might call chaos. Scattered across various workstations were dozens of mechanical watches, each disassembled to different degrees. "The inefficiency is staggering," Administrator Vix observed. "These humans used tiny metal gears and springs to measure time when quantum chronometers have existed for millennia. Yet they achieved space travel with such primitive technology." Professor Nix 427 lifted the watch with a field manipulator, turning it slowly. "That's precisely what makes it fascinating. Look at the craftsmanship, the attention to aesthetic detail. They didn't just create a time measurement tool, they created something they call beautiful." The research team had been assigned to study human artifacts after Earth joined the Galactic Alliance. What started as a routine analysis had evolved into something far more challenging. The humans' tendency to combine functionality with what they termed artistry defied conventional scientific understanding. "Bring in the next item," Professor Nix 427 commanded. A hovering drone delivered a wooden object with 4 strings stretched across it. "The violin," she announced, her tone mixing curiosity with frustration. "Another example of human inefficiency that somehow produces results we cannot explain." The team had already analyzed hundreds of digital music files from Earth. They understood the mathematical principles of sound waves and harmony. Yet this primitive wooden box somehow produced sounds that their most advanced synthesizers couldn't replicate perfectly. "Play the recording," she instructed. The laboratory filled with the sound of a violin concerto. Administrator Vix's patterns swirled in discomfort. "The human playing this instrument is technically introducing microscopic imperfections in timing and pitch," he noted. "Yet their musical archives indicate this performance is considered masterful. It defies logic." Professor Nix 427 moved to the third artifact of the day, a collection of folded paper shapes. Origami, the humans called it. The scientific value of folding plant fiber into animal shapes escaped her, yet she couldn't deny the mathematical precision involved. "These 3 items represent a fundamental gap in our understanding," she declared. "The watch shows they create complex solutions when simple ones exist. The violin demonstrates their preference for difficult-to-master tools over precise automated systems. And these paper constructions show they assign value to temporary creations with no practical purpose." A junior researcher interrupted with an urgent message. The Institute's governing council was demanding preliminary results. Professor Nix 427's colors shifted to what humans would call pale blue, a sign of deep thought among her species. "Tell them," she said finally, "that we require a paradigm shift in our research approach. We've been attempting to understand human technology through our own technological framework. Instead, we need to understand why they create as they do." Administrator Vix's patterns froze in shock. "You're suggesting we study their psychological development, their cultural evolution. That's far beyond our assignment parameters." "Nevertheless, it's essential," Professor Nix 427 insisted. "These artifacts suggest that human advancement follows patterns we've never considered. They seem to value the process of creation as much as its result. They intentionally choose more difficult paths when easier ones exist. And somehow, this approach led them to develop technologies that rival our own, despite their relative youth as a species." She turned to the watch again, its gears ticking with maddening persistence. "We need to understand not just how these devices work, but why humans made them this way. Otherwise, we risk underestimating their potential for future advancement. As if to underscore her point, a gentle chime filled the laboratory, the watch marking another hour with its inefficient yet mesmerizing precision. Professor Nix 427 made a decision that would change the course of their research. Administrator Vix, prepare for long-term anthropological study. We're going to learn not just what humans build, but why they build it. Something tells me we've only scratched the surface of their peculiar genius. The research center's recreation chamber, normally empty during work cycles, now hosted an unusual scene. Professor Nix 427 and Administrator Vix sat motionless before a checkered board, their forms reflecting deeply concentrated states. This makes no logical sense. Vix's pattern swirled in agitation. The optimal move exists, yet humans consistently choose suboptimal strategies in this chess game. Professor Nix 427 adjusted her sensory field to study the board more closely. Their quantum computers had long ago solved chess, mapping every possible move and countermove. Yet human grandmasters still competed, still surprised each other, still created what humans called beautiful games. Review the historical match data again, she instructed. Focus on the games where human players deviated from computer-recommended moves. The holographic display above the board flickered to life, showing centuries of chess matches. Games where humans had chosen surprising strategies, sacrificed pieces for seemingly illogical advantages, or created positions that even advanced AI had initially misunderstood. Fascinating. Professor Nix 427's crystalline structure sparkled with excitement. They deliberately introduce chaos into a system of perfect order. They call it creative play. Their investigation had expanded beyond simple mechanical devices. The research team now studied human games, puzzles, and recreational activities. Each new discovery added to their growing confusion about human nature. "Bring in the next artifact," she commanded. A drone delivered a strange contraption of tubes, wheels, and small plastic balls. The humans call this a Rube Goldberg machine, she explained to her bewildered assistant. The machine was a perfect example of human paradox, and deliberately complex device designed to perform a simple task. In this case, 27 steps to pour a cup of water. Their analysis showed that humans created these machines not for practical use, but for entertainment and educational purposes. They seemed to delight in complexity for its own sake, Vix observed, his patterns forming questioning spirals. Even their children's toys often involve unnecessary steps and challenges. Professor Nix 427 moved to a workstation covered in human puzzle boxes. Each one represented a different type of challenge: mathematical, mechanical, logical, or pattern-based. Some were simple enough for human children. Others had challenged their best minds for weeks. "Look at this," she indicated a particular puzzle. "The solution is deliberately hidden." The satisfaction appears to come from the process of discovery itself, not the end result. Their research had revealed something unexpected about human learning and development. Unlike their own species, which valued efficiency and direct knowledge transfer, humans seemed to learn best through what they called trial and error. "Pull up the educational statistics," she requested. The air filled with comparative data showing learning outcomes across different species. Notice how human children exposed to puzzles and games show enhanced problem-solving abilities in seemingly unrelated fields. The implications were staggering. What they had initially dismissed as inefficient entertainment might actually be a sophisticated system for developing cognitive flexibility. The humans had turned the very act of learning into something they enjoyed. Administrator Vix. Professor Nix 427's tone became serious. "I believe we need to revise our entire understanding of technological development. The humans don't just create tools to solve problems. They create problems to develop new ways of thinking." A notification pulsed through the room's information field. Another human artifact had arrived for study. Something called a kaleidoscope. Professor Nix 427 lifted the simple tube, peered through it, and her entire form flickered in surprise. They've created a device whose sole purpose is to generate random patterns for visual pleasure, she announced. Yet the mathematical principles behind its operation are the same ones we use in our most advanced space-folding technologies. Vix's patterns contracted in disbelief. Are you suggesting their recreational activities have led to advanced scientific understanding? More than that, Professor Nix 427 replied, turning back to the chessboard. I'm suggesting that their definition of advancement itself might be fundamentally different from ours. They don't just seek solutions, they seek understanding. And somehow, they've turned that search into something they call fun. She moved a chess piece, deliberately choosing the suboptimal position. Perhaps it's time we tried to understand not just what they know, but how they learn. Administrator Vix, would you like to play another game? This time, let's ignore the optimal moves and try something creative. The laboratory's lights dimmed as the two aliens began their game, their traditional logical approaches giving way to something new, something almost human in its wonderful inefficiency. The Galactic Institute's cultural analysis chamber had never been so chaotic. Holographic displays flickered with hundreds of human entertainment forms simultaneously. Movies, video games, sports broadcasts, and theatrical performances all competing for attention. Professor Nix 427's crystalline form vibrated with increasing perplexity as she attempted to catalog and categorize the endless varieties of human amusement. They spend approximately 30% of their waking hours engaged in activities with no apparent survival value, she noted. The latest subject of their study, a human theme park, particularly confounded their research team. The holographic recreation showed thousands of humans waiting in long queues to experience simulated danger. They pay currency to be frightened, Administrator Vix observed, his geometric patterns forming confused spirals. Then they exit these roller coasters and immediately desire to experience it again. More puzzling still, Professor Nix 427 added, they create entire fictional universes for entertainment. Look at this phenomenon they call cosplay. Humans investing significant resources to temporarily transform themselves into imaginary beings. Their research had uncovered something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that deliberately sought out emotional experiences for their own sake. The humans didn't just create art, they immersed themselves in it. A junior researcher, designated Tau 89, approached with a new analysis. Professor, we've completed the neurological comparison. When humans engage in entertainment activities, their brains show similar patterns to those observed during problem-solving and innovation. Professor Nix 427 shifted through various shades of deep thought. Show me the correlation data. The air filled with neural mapping comparisons. Humans playing video games displayed remarkable similarities to those operating complex machinery. Those engaged in storytelling activated the same brain regions used for predictive modeling and strategic planning. They've integrated learning into their recreation, she realized. Or perhaps they've made learning recreational. The distinction seems increasingly meaningless. The research team had recently begun experimenting with human entertainment forms themselves. A separate chamber had been dedicated to what humans called improvisational theater. The results were both promising and disturbing. Several researchers had started showing signs of increased creative thinking, much to the concern of the Institute's traditional administrators. Project the Sports Analysis, Professor Nix 427 requested. The room filled with images of human athletic competitions. Notice how they deliberately impose arbitrary restrictions to increase difficulty. They could easily use technological assistance to achieve perfect results, yet they consider that cheating. Administrator Vix's patterns shifted uncomfortably. Yesterday's research team spent 6 hours attempting to understand something called interpretive dance. They claimed it was necessary for their analysis, but their behavior seemed irregular. Professor Nix 427 moved to a workstation dedicated to human musical composition. Their species had long ago developed algorithms for creating mathematically perfect harmonies, yet humans consistently preferred music with subtle imperfections and emotional resonance. "I believe we're witnessing something revolutionary," she announced. "The humans have developed a completely different relationship with existence itself. They don't just solve problems, they play with them. They don't just communicate, they perform. They don't just exist, they imagine." A notification pulsed. The Institute's governing council was expressing concern about the research team's excessive involvement in human recreational activities. Professor Nix 427 dismissed it with a gesture that would have been considered rebellious in their traditional society. "Bring in the painting supplies," she instructed, causing Administrator Vix's patterns to freeze in shock. "We've analyzed human art for long enough. It's time we attempted to create some ourselves." As the research team gathered around canvases and colors, Professor Nix 427 made another entry in her research log, Day 157. "Beginning to suspect that human entertainment isn't a distraction from advancement, it is their advancement. Their art isn't separate from their science. Their play isn't distinct from their work. They have achieved something we never considered. They have made evolution itself entertaining." The chamber filled with the sounds of uncertain alien researchers beginning to paint, their traditional precision giving way to experimental brushstrokes. In one corner, a group had started what they insisted was a jazz improvisation session. And through it all, Professor Nix 427 recorded everything, knowing that they were documenting not just human culture, but the transformation of their own. In what had once been a pristine genealogical research facility, Professor Nix 427 now stood surrounded by what could only be described as organized chaos. The chamber had been transformed into what humans called a maker space, filled with building blocks, craft supplies, and various human educational toys. "Status report," she requested, her crystalline form reflecting rainbow patterns off the scattered Legio bricks covering one workstation. "Most irregular," Professor Administrator Vix reported, his geometric patterns betraying excitement despite his formal tone. "Our junior researchers have spent 48 standard cycles constructing and deconstructing these interlocking blocks. They claim to be studying human childhood development. But," he hesitated, "they appear to be enjoying themselves." The research team had begun investigating human educational methods after discovering that human children often learned complex principles through what appeared to be simple play. The results were transforming their understanding of cognitive development. "Display the comparative learning analysis," Professor Nix 427 commanded. Holographic charts materialized, showing how humans acquired new skills compared to other species. Notice the correlation between playful experimentation and innovation rates. Their own species had always valued direct knowledge transfer, efficient, precise, and utterly logical. Yet humans seemed to thrive on exploration, trial and error, and what they called happy accidents. A group of researchers huddled around a peculiar device called a microscope kit for kids. Despite having access to quantum imaging technology that could map individual atoms, they found themselves fascinated by the simple optical instrument. "They learn by discovery," Professor Nix 427 noted, watching her team's enthusiasm. "Even when they know the answer, they prefer to find it themselves." The evidence was becoming undeniable. Human children who engaged in unstructured play showed higher rates of creative problem-solving. Their educational toys weren't just simplified versions of adult tools. They were gateways to understanding fundamental principles in engaging ways. "Bring up the sandbox simulation," she instructed. A holographic environment appeared, modeled after human playground equipment. They create safe spaces for failure, for experimentation. Every fall teaches something about gravity. Every construction in the sand teaches principles of engineering. Administrator Vix's patterns swirled thoughtfully. "Perhaps we've been asking the wrong questions. Instead of wondering why humans play, we should ask why we stopped." The implications were revolutionary. Their civilization had achieved technological marvels through careful, methodical advancement. But had they lost something vital in their pursuit of efficiency? Professor Nix 427 reached for a collection of wooden blocks, beginning to stack them deliberately. Sometimes, she mused, the longest path to understanding might actually be the shortest. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Institute hummed with tense energy as Professor Nix 427 prepared to present her research team's final conclusions. The crystalline forms of the highest-ranking scientists and administrators filled the chamber, their usual orderly arrangement disrupted by an unusual addition. A human child's drawing hung prominently behind the presentation platform. Distinguished colleagues, Professor Nix 427 began, her form glowing with conviction. We embarked on this research to understand human technological development. We conclude instead that we must redefine our understanding of development itself. The holographic displays activated, showing a montage of human creativity, children playing, artists creating, scientists experimenting, all blending together in a seamless flow of innovation and discovery. Humans don't separate growth from enjoyment, work from play, or art from science, she continued. What we perceived as inefficiency is actually a profound integration of all aspects of existence. The assembly stirred uncomfortably as she produced a simple paper airplane, launching it across the chamber. This simple toy teaches principles of aerodynamics. Their children learn while playing. Their playing leads to innovation. Their innovation sparks joy, which encourages more play, more learning, more innovation. Administrator Vix, now her staunch ally, displayed the research data. The statistics were undeniable. Human societies that encouraged creativity and playful experimentation showed faster technological advancement than those that followed more rigid traditional paths. We propose, Professor Nix 427 announced, a revolutionary change in our own educational and research methodologies. We must learn not just from human technology, but from their way of learning itself. The chamber erupted in debate. Some members recoiled from the suggestion of such radical change. Others, particularly younger researchers, showed signs of eager anticipation. Our civilization achieved greatness through order, efficiency, and logical progression. A senior administrator objected. You suggest we abandon this for play. Professor Nix 427's form brightened with intensity. I suggest we enhance it. The humans haven't sacrificed advancement for enjoyment. They've discovered how to combine them. Their greatest innovations often come from what they call playing around with ideas. The evidence was compelling. Human children who grew up with access to art, music, and unstructured play showed greater innovative capacity in later life. Their scientists often made breakthroughs while engaging in seemingly unrelated creative activities. We stand at a crossroads, she concluded. We can continue to advance along our linear path, or we can embrace a new way of growing, learning, and creating. The humans have shown us that joy and progress are not opposing forces. They are catalysts for each other. The chamber fell silent as her words sank in. Then, from the back, a young researcher began to create a simple melody using their crystalline resonance. Another joined in, then another, their normally rigid patterns flowing into something new, something collaborative, something almost playful. Professor Nix 427 made her final log entry as the impromptu performance continued. The humans didn't just show us new technologies. They showed us a new way of being. Perhaps the greatest invention they shared with us was not any device or machine, but the simple, profound idea that growth and joy are inseparable parts of the same journey. The revolution had begun, not with declarations or mandates, but with play. And as the chamber filled with the unmistakable sound of alien laughter, Professor Nix 427 knew that their civilization would never be the same.